Hey, this is John Hansen talking about the 2016 Mr. Olympia. This was the 52nd Mr. Olympia. It took place in Las Vegas, Nevada over the weekend. And Phil Heath was the winner again, number 6. And Phil came in really, really good shape this year. Usually for the last 2 years, he's been off at the prejudging. And he came back Saturday night to finalize the victory, but he barely won, in my opinion, over the last 2 years. But this year, he really brought it, came in really peak condition for both the prejudging on Friday and the evening show on Saturday. And he was in excellent condition. He was very confident and also a little bit more mature than usual. He didn't seem like he was as temperamental as he usually is. So he seems like he's coming into his own, and he knew he had this victory, and he did everything he could to win. So congratulations to Phil Heath for winning his 6th Mr. Olympia. Vying for second place was Sean Roden and Dexter Jackson. Dexter took second last year. Dexter is a 2008 Mr. Olympia winner, and he wants to win that title again. He wants to get at least 2 victories before he retires, and at 47 years old, he knows that the end is coming near. But unfortunately, Dexter was in third this year. He was a little bit off at the prejudging on Friday, not as shredded as he usually is. Came in much better on Saturday, but by then he was already in third place. Sean Roden has the potential to really win this title. He's very aesthetic. He's got a small waist, but he's still a big guy. He's about 240 pounds on stage and very small waist, but sometimes he's letting that waist stick out in between poses or even when he's relaxed, and that hurts him because that's really his strong point. And he really just doesn't have the aggression needed to be Mr. Olympia. He just seems like he's walking through the Mr. Olympia and he's not really going after it. And this is a problem he had the last couple years. He just doesn't seem hungry enough to win the title in comparison to Phil Heath, who's very, very hungry to win the title, and he dares anybody to take the title away from him. So I don't think Sean is ever going to beat Phil unless he really changes his attitude and goes after it. So Sean was in second place this year. I think this was the first time he ever took second place. So he did good, but it's hard to see a guy with such great potential. You know he could do better. Fourth place went to Big Ramy from Egypt. Ramy has moved up the ladder every year. He took, I think, 8th place the first year he was in the Mr. Olympia. Moved up to 7th the next year, and then he was 5th last year. So he was in 4th place this time. He was a little bit smaller, believe it or not. Didn't have his crazy, freaky size on Friday night because he tried to come in more conditioned. But Saturday he was much fuller and much bigger, and he actually beat a lot of the lineup in a few poses. So there's a chance Ramy could be a future Mr. Olympia. He was very animated on stage, which was good to see. So he's definitely coming into his own now after his 4th Mr. Olympia. And I think he's got a shot at winning this thing. He just really needs to nail his condition and still bring that freaky size. His thighs are still a little bit out of proportion to the rest of them because they're so overblown. But we'll see what the future holds for Big Ramy. This was a big placing for him. 5th place went to the surprise of the contest, William Bonnick. William is a shorter bodybuilder, but very thick, and he was very conditioned. He was being trained by Neil Hill, who is James Flex Lewis's coach, and he really came in outstanding condition. He beat a lot of big names. 5th place was a surprise placing. Most people didn't have him that high. He was 8th last year, so he did well, but really moving into the top 5 was a huge placing for him. So we'll see what the future holds. It doesn't seem like he can pack on much more muscle on his frame, but what he has on his frame is great shape. He's in really ripped condition and a lot of muscle thickness, and also very good personality on stage. 6th place went to the freak, Rowley Winkler. Rowley was bigger than ever, and the crowd really loved him. This guy's arms are gigantic. He's really a freak on stage. You got to see him in person to believe it, and he's got a great personality on stage, so people really love him. A little thick-waisted, and could have maybe been a little bit harder, a little bit better condition, but he's a real freak, and I think he's doing the best he can. No, that doesn't make sense. So this was the highest placing for Rowley at the Mr. Olympia ever. Just out of that top 6 was Cedric McMillan. Cedric is a great aesthetic bodybuilder, standing about 6'1". He almost won the Arnold Classic this year, so I thought his placings would move up at the Olympia. But unfortunately, he took 7th place. He looked very disappointed at that placing. His posing routine at night was really good. I think he could have been a little sharper, a little bit better conditioned, and he just doesn't get the comparisons with the top guys like Phil Heath and Dexter Jackson, and I know he was sort of asking for that at the press conference. So unfortunately, he took 7th place, and Cedric, again, also sort of like Sean, needs to come back just a little hungrier. little more serious and to really take the title away from Phil Heath and to really challenge for those top spots. So we'll see what the next year brings for Cedric. He's getting older too, so he doesn't really have a lot of time left. I would love to see him place really high at the Mr. Olympia like his physique deserves. 8th place went to another newcomer, Dallas McCarver, competing in his second Mr. Olympia. Dallas is only 25 years old. What potential this kid has. I mean, he is definitely a future Mr. Olympia. Dallas is potentially definitely a future Mr. Olympia. He's got the size, he's got the structure. He's another tall guy, very wide, great physique, real good leg development, and he put on a lot of size over his upper body over the last year. Moved from 13th place last year, which was a little bit too low for him, up to 8th place this year. So he's definitely moving up the ladder, and I think this guy's got great potential, and he could one day be a future Mr. Olympia. At only 25 years old, the best is yet ahead for him. The 9th place was another rookie to the contest, Josh Lenardowitz from Australia. Josh is probably the best bodybuilder in the world in Australia. He did really well at the Arnold this year. He took 3rd place. He's another tall guy, another big guy, wide shoulders, great leg development, and he always comes in great condition. Very aggressive on stage, has a good attitude, so I think the best is yet for him. He possibly could have been even a couple spots higher. So Josh is going to do really well, I'm sure, in the shows following the Olympia, and we'll look for him again at the Arnold next year. Looking out that top 10 was Justin Compton, competing in his first Mr. Olympia, although Justin has been a pro bodybuilder for a couple years now. He won a couple pro shows in the months leading up to the Olympia, and he was probably looking his best now compared to how he's looked in his pro career. He's got great aesthetics, very small waist, but really blown out muscles, huge legs, huge arms, and he's got great aesthetic shape. He just needs to really nail his conditioning, and I think he needs work on his posing. He doesn't seem like he hits the poses correctly a lot of times, and his posing routine would be much stronger, more powerful if he would really nail those poses and execute them correctly. So that was the top 10, and of course we have to mention the comeback of Kevin Levrone, which was the story this year. Kevin, at 52 years old, after a 13-year layoff, one of the best bodybuilders in the 1990s, back to the Mr. Olympia this year. He said with only 6 months training, his upper body was eerily reminiscent of how he used to look, and his legs were just down in size, and so that's why he was placed so low. He was probably in 16th place at the contest. The crowd loved his comeback. Everybody was very inspired by it, and I don't think he's coming back. He said that he was one and done at the interview after the show. So it looks like he's not going to come back, but it was still a great comeback for Kevin. Didn't turn out the way he was hoping. Everybody was hoping to see the old 1990s Kevin Levrone going up against Phil Heath for the title. Didn't work out that way, but still inspired a lot of people, and it really was a great comeback. You figure with only 6 months of training to bring back his arms and chest and shoulders looked just as big as ever. His back, which was always his weak body part, still looked like it needed some work. Didn't have quite the thickness of the other competitors, and his legs were way out of proportion. I'd like to see what he could do with another year of training, so maybe Kevin will be convinced to come back again. We'll see. So that's it. That's the wrap-up for the Mr. Olympia 2016. It was a great show. Look forward to seeing you again next year. This is John Hansen. We're out.